Emmerdale star Joshua Richards has explained Beowulf's big bombshell next week, as he finally faces the music over the death of Ray Walters. The character recently killed the villainous Ray in self-defense after being held captive as a slave. In tonight's scenes, Bear will hand himself in to the police after confessing to the death, and is set to be charged with manslaughter next week. Opening up about Bear's decision to plead guilty, Joshua told us that his character has this mistaken sense of honor, and that he's got to own up to what he did, even though he was totally unaware of what he did at the time he was doing it. And it's just this old-fashioned sort of, well, I did it, therefore I should take the consequences, he added. It's misguided and wrong, but he firmly believes that that's the honorable thing to do. This of course raises fears for son Paddy, who has been helping Bear to cover things up, Joshua noting. He's desperately trying not to reveal those facts to the police to Walsh. But, of course, it's a tricky situation when you're under interrogation, and it's easy to confuse people. So hopefully, Bear is going in there to say, I did it, leave everybody else alone, they're nothing to do with it. But police have ways of tripping you up. Despite Bear's fragile mental state, the police officer is particularly ruthless and obviously wants to get this crime sorted, alongside nailing as many people as possible. Her remit seems to be quite wide with Moira after Kane, and after Paddy, after Dylan, after me, he added. She doesn't want one person, she wants everybody. Reflecting on Bear's mind when he's charged with manslaughter, Joshua shared. I think, in his mind, taking a life is taking a life. It's a life for a life, as a very old-fashioned. Even if it was in self-defense, not in the right frame of mind. In fact, almost being a victim of a nervous breakdown and being practically insane at the time. He still believes that he should take the consequences. The village of Emmerdale had seen its share of darkness, but the death of Ray Walters had left something deeper behind. A wound that refused to close. For some, Ray's end had brought relief. For others, guilt. For Beowulf, it brought something else entirely. Responsibility. Chapter 1. The walk to the station the morning Bear decided to hand himself in. The village was deceptively peaceful. Birdsong. Crisp air. A faint breeze rolling across the fields that it felt wrong that he stood outside the Anderson household, staring at his reflection in the window. His shoulders were broad, his beard flecked with grey, his body still powerful, but his eyes told another story. They were tired, haunted. Behind him, Paddy Kirk hovered anxiously. You don't have to do this, Paddy said quietly. Bear didn't turn around. Yes, I do. The words were calm. Certain, I killed him. Paddy swallowed hard. It was self-defense. You were enslaved. You weren't in your right mind. Bear finally turned, meeting his son's desperate gaze. A life's a life, Paddy. That was all he said. And then he walked. Chapter 2. What really happened? Ray Walters had held Bear captive. Stripped him of dignity. Of control. Of hope. Forced labor. Psychological torment. Isolation. Bear hadn't been a willing accomplice to anything. He'd been a prisoner. The night Ray died, everything spiraled. Ray taunted him. Mocked Anya's death. Threatened to hurt April again. Bear's vision blurred. His chest tightened. A shove. A fall. A struggle. Then silence. Bear hadn't even realized Ray was dead at first, that he had been in the grip of something close to madness. A breakdown months in the making. But when clarity returned, Ray was gone, and the weight of that reality settled like iron in his chest. Chapter 3. The confession. The police station felt colder than it should have. DS Walsh watched him carefully from across the table. You're saying, you killed Ray Walters? Yes. No one else involved? No. Walsh leaned back, unimpressed. You expect me to believe that? Bear's jaw tightened. I did it. Leave the rest alone. Walsh's eyes flickered. Funny thing about investigations, Mr. Wolf. They're rarely that simple. Bear felt a flicker of fear then, not for himself, for Paddy, for Dylan, for April. He had to keep them out of it. But Walsh wasn't the type to settle for one confession. She wanted the whole village. Chapter 4. The charge. When the charge came, manslaughter, Paddy felt both relief and dread. Not murder, but still prison. The solicitor tried to explain. We argue diminished responsibility. Trauma. Self-defense. Bear shook his head. No excuses. This isn't about excuses, the solicitor insisted. It's about context. But Bear's mind was fixed that he was old-fashioned. Honor-bound. I did it, he repeated. I take the consequences. To him, there was no grey area, even if he'd been enslaved. Even if he'd been mentally unwell. Even if Ray had been a monster. Taking a life was taking a life. Chapter 5. Paddy's terror. Paddy couldn't breathe, that he had helped cover it up. Moved evidence. stayed silent. If Walsh dug deeper, she'd find it. Joshua Richards later described Bear's mindset as having a mistaken sense of honor, and Paddy could see that clearly now. Bear wasn't thinking strategically, he wasn't thinking legally, he was thinking morally, and morality didn't always survive interrogation. Walsh was ruthless. She questioned Paddy for hours. You knew, didn't you? I suspected. That's not the same thing. Silence. Police had ways of tripping you up, and Walsh wanted everybody. Moira, Kane, Dylan, Paddy. She wasn't hunting one culprit. She was hunting a network. Chapter 6. Bear's mind in his cell. Bear sat quietly. No visions now. No Ray in the corner of his no whispers. The confession had cleared something. But it hadn't erased his belief. He replayed the moment again, and again. He could have walked away. Couldn't he? He wasn't certain. His mind had been fractured. He'd been practically insane with stress. But none of that mattered to him. A man was dead. By his hand. That was enough. Chapter 7. The village divides. Words spread quickly. Some villagers said Bear was brave. Others said he was foolish. Ray was evil, one muttered in the Woolpack. Still, another replied, killing's killing. Moira Dingle watched quietly. She knew trauma, knew what it meant to lose control. She didn't judge Bear. She feared for him. Chapter 8. Dylan and April. Dylan Penders felt sick. Bear had protected them. He hadn't meant to kill. Ray had engineered the entire nightmare. April Windsor struggled with guilt. If it wasn't for me. But Paddy stopped her. No. This is on Ray. Still, the weight lingered. They visited Bear before his next hearing. He smiled softly. I'm all right. He wasn't, but he was steadier than before. Chapter 9. Walsh's strategy. Walsh wasn't satisfied. Bear's confession was too clean. Too protective. She pressed again. You moved the body? Bear hesitated. Walsh noticed. And who helped? He said nothing, but silence can speak loudly. Chapter 10. The breaking point under pressure. Bear almost slipped. Mentioned Paddy's name. Corrected himself. Walsh leaned in. You're not protecting anyone, are you? Bear clenched his fists. I did it alone. She didn't believe him. But proving otherwise was another matter. Chapter 11. Joshua Richards speaks behind the scenes. Actor Joshua Richards explained Bear's psychology. Bear has a mistaken sense of honor, he believes that owning up is noble. Even if he wasn't fully aware of his actions. Even if he was mentally unwell, he's old-fashioned, if he did it. He must pay. That's how Bear sees the world. It's misguided. But it's deeply sincere. Chapter 12. The plea. The solicitor begged him to reconsider. Think strategically. Bear shook his head. No, not guilty. No, he would plead guilty. Because in his mind, context didn't erase consequence. Chapter 13. Paddy's worst fear. If Bear pleaded guilty without nuance, the court wouldn't hear about the captivity, the psychological torment, the breakdown, and if Walsh kept digging, Paddy could be charged too. Accessory after the fact. He lay awake at night, replaying every mistake, every silence, every lie. Chapter 14. A father's love. Before the court date, Paddy visited Bear alone. I'm scared, Paddy admitted. Bear's expression softened. I never meant to drag you into this. You didn't. I did. Bear placed a hand over his son's. If anything happens, I'll take it. All of it. Paddy's eyes filled. That's not how it works. But Bear wished it did. Chapter 15. Facing the music. As the hearing approached, the village held its breath. Bear stood taller than he had in months, because finally, the secret wasn't crushing him. Whatever happened next, he would endure it. Not because he believed he deserved prison, but because he believed consequences mattered. To him, honor wasn't about survival. It was about accountability. Even when it hurt. Final question. Will Paddy go down too? The answer remains uncertain. Walsh is determined. The investigation is wide, and police rarely stop at one confession. But one thing is clear. Bear didn't confess because he was weak. He confessed because he believed it was right. In a world of grey morality, Bear Wolf sees things in black and white. And that may cost him everything.